How's it, Paul? How are you doing this evening?
I'm well, Mike, and you seem to be on top of the world also from the smile on your face.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about that. I'm going on leave in a couple of days, so it's been a long year. So it's
Yeah,
I'm going to
yeah,
enjoy the I'm going to enjoy the break. Paul, I think we're reconvening on our analysis of the burning building in Johannesburg that happened in geez, let me get it in August, right?
yeah,
31st of August, I think it happened.
yeah.
And I think we've done some initial analysis on it, and I think we're just going to chat a bit more
Yes,
about that analysis. I think you've finished off a second article on it now, and I think the article focuses more on how the story is presented in the news. The articles that we certainly the ones that the news outlets that we looked at now recently, there were a couple of them, I think up to five of them. They present a very scant perspective of an event, and that could be for a couple of reasons. But I think that falls into your into the five filters that you've highlighted there. Now that's one talking point that we can address. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
the five filters was really for me a starting point, like a very, very broad, maybe even abstract framework. And I came across this very interesting article by uh, Jane Duncan, who's actually
Yeah.
quite has established a name for herself as a critical analyst of the news. What I found in her analysis was that she gave far more. She took the very broad five filters framework, if you like, okay, and she started unpacking it still conceptually, but using the Marikana content as an example of how she would apply it. She started unpacking those five more general filter concepts into more detailed concepts. Okay, um, and and um, and so what I tried to show in the diagram was the way I thought very usefully um, unpacked a more detailed theory of political economy analysis of the media of a media article. So, for instance, there are three levels that I picked up in her work. The one is the reporting or the field work. Okay, going to collect the information. Um, the second one is the quantitative um, analysis, and I see I made a mistake in my diagram. I've got two qualitative analysis levels. But the first one's actually the quantitative analysis, and the second one is the qualitative analysis. And what she really says is that um, reporting has two aspects to it. One is forensic, where you follow, like forensics, you follow the paper trail. You're quite sort of factual, evidence based, if you like. You follow the paper trail. And then there's a thing called social reporting, where you are critically analyzing underlying trends. And it takes you into questions of class and social power, to try and understand why certain people do certain things that you're reporting on and why others don't. And then getting into the quantitative analysis, um, she has things like sources used. Are they elite sources, or are they talking to the grassroots? And who the what you call secondly who the primary definers? Which of these sources are quoted frequently enough to realize that that story is defined by them? And that leads to the types of themes that come out. And I used examples of five themes that I thought came out of the five platforms that we examined, actually a total now of 24 articles. In conclusion, I tried to address a very simple question. What am I actually trying to say here in terms of seeing a problem, and in terms of through seeing it, in a certain way and understanding it, creating the basis for a framework for resolving it or for thinking through the resolution of the problem. So let me just leave that with you, but there may be other points that you want to raise, and hear my response.
Sure. What I'm reading here is, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, and maybe you can talk more about it, right? Is that you emphasize the need for like public development solutions to provide safe, decent, and affordable housing. And you critique the influence of neoliberal ideologies and policies within the media narratives, right? And I think the neoliberal ideologies is something interesting to talk about, because what I found interesting was that how I think what you're saying here is that like the neoliberalism or the neoliberal kind of ideology or outlook tends to undermine the government's capacities, okay, for regulating things. And it focuses on some sort of entrepreneurial practices that prioritize profitability over safety measures. In this sense, but in a broader sense, are we saying that the neoliberal ideology within, let's say, the media is happy to almost demonize the government, and sometimes maybe in a valid way, because on some issues, if not most issues, government can be quite useless, right? But are you saying that there's almost an intentional or purposeful critique of government methods because of a neoliberal outlook or ideology that is almost encouraging a more privatization of what's the word? Privatization of services that in fact the state should be giving to their citizens. Does that make sense?
You asked me whether I was saying that this is a ideology and a view that is actually undermining government's role in economic sort of and housing development and all of that. And my answer to you was yes, but also no, in the sense that I don't think it's consciously directed that way. They understand that government is also inherently an entrepreneur, and that for government to function efficiently, it has got to be entrepreneurial. And they're not saying that it needs to cut corners in regulation. They say, no, you must regulate, and you must control for the sake of the economy. You must control malpractice and building standards, health standards. They're not saying avoid that, okay? But the unintended consequence, maybe you could say, of this heightened competition pressure all across the economy starts putting a dampening on investments that don't give you immediate return. Okay, so you can like really cut those costs down to a bone in order to expand your surplus as an entrepreneur, including in an entrepreneurial state. And regulation is an investment. Regulation is not a revenue generator. Inspectors have got to be hired, they've got to be trained, they've got to go out and look at buildings, and they've got to do it diligently. And in the case of the inner city of Joburg, there are a lot of buildings that have deteriorated decades ago already. It started, and it requires quite a huge army of people who dedicated and who get paid properly to do this. You can't expect them to be, overworked and paid maybe a bit short, because they're going to become prone to taking incentives, explicit theoretical framework in anything you're doing, and your research needs to test it out. And so what I pick up from Duncan and the BBC paper for me was reinforcing specific aspects of the Duncan framework and very consistent with it. And so that is the value, I think, of having this framework and spelling it out, graphically, because that's about the most objective you can become, where you're not walking around and implicitly saying things that you're not unpacking, because I think that is where bias that is not expressed comes in. We're all going to be biased, so let's say I'm biased theoretically towards the truth in that way. Here it is. Here's my evidence. Here's my argument. And I think news needs to be driven that way, instead of through superficial sound bites of impartiality as balance. Obviously, you need to be impartial if you're reporting and there's a party there who you're politically opposed to. You've got to put that in the parking lot, obviously. But the thing is made into a dogma that is subject to enormous economic pressure, which Duncan actually spells out quite well, and incredible pressure on deadlines. The paper's got to come out. Maybe you've got to be driven less by time. I mean, it took me 5 solid days, I think, or 4 solid days to write this thing. It's about 2.5 or 2,700 words. People say, if you're over 800 words, sorry, you can't publish. Other people say 200 is the maximum. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.